The more you over-explain, the more you're going to find yourself victimized by them. Don't be afraid to admit that you're wrong when you do something. Or just simply say you're right. You've got to. You've made a very good point, and I will learn from that, and I won't do it in the future. This is one of the great things that my wife and I are able to do with each other over and over again. Instead of having these arguments that are endless, it's like you stop yourself right in the middle. And you say, you know, you're right. You made a good point. I did. I was a jerk. I did behave stupidly, and I'm going to see if I don't do that, it stops. I mean, I've seen my wife have her mouth fall almost onto the floor when I've just turned around and stopped being pushy about it and admitted, yeah, you've made a good point. And usually the person doing the most talking is the one that's wrong. Try to learn from the past rather than repeating it and making references to it all the time. And silently forgive all of the people in your life who you feel have phobic demise you in some way. That's such an important lesson to learn. Forgiveness that all of those people who behaved towards you in the past that you might still be hanging on today. The ex-spouse, the child that doesn't call, the person who borrowed money from you who hasn't repaid it, the parent or the grandparent who ignored you or abused you in some way. That forgiveness is a very, very powerful tool. All of the spiritual masters who've ever come our way, including, of course, Christ on the cross. When someone threw a spear and soldier threw a spear into him, his first words are, forgive them, for he knows not what he does. That's such an important concept to get, that he doesn't. The reason that Christ was saying he knows not what he does is because he was really saying that when you throw a spear into me, you throw a spear into yourself. Because we're all connected. We're all one. And the same thing is true for all the people who have thrown spears into you. If you will over-harmed you in some way. It's like a snake bite. If a snake comes along and bites you, no one ever died from a snake bite. The bite is just a bite. It's just a wound that's on. And you can't unbind a snake, can't untie you. What kills you is the venom that is pouring through your system and destroying you. And the metaphor there is that what is destructive to you in this whole business of not being victimized by what is over is the venom, which is your thoughts that you carry around. The behavior is done. You can't undo it. You can't change it. You can't get it. You can't unabuse someone. You can't not abandon them now. Well, if you already did. You can't repay the money that you never repaid. I mean, that's all done. That's all, you didn't do it. That's over with. But what you can do now, just decide not to carry that around, not to let their behavior destroy you. Mark Twain put it this way. He said, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. And you have to know how to do that. Because once you let it go and get rid of it, I can remember someone was trying to sue me at one time over some silly little thing, and I was angry and filled with rage about it and going to really show them that they couldn't do it. And once I let it go and once I sent forgiveness out, then send love where I was sending hate before, I lost, the food was dropped. And I have all of the things that I worried about so much just, melted away. And the same thing will happen with so much of the victimizing that you do. Get forgiveness into your heart. And you'll find yourself a whole lot better off and not being victimized by all that stuff that happened years and years and years ago. That isn't worth hanging on to anyway, pulling your own strings. Another common way that people pull your strings instead of you pulling them yourself is this whole business of what I call the comparison trap in a world of individuals. Comparison is a senseless activity. You are unique in all the world. No one can get behind your eyeballs and be you. No one can experience you. The only thing that anyone can experience you with is their mind. Everything else is a step removed. Their thoughts are what they have to experience you with. And so too do you experience everyone else with your thoughts. Otherwise, you are experiencing existential aloneness. Existential alone, this is really very different than loneliness. See, loneliness is experienced when you don't like the person you're alone with. But aloneness, it's just in the way of things. You can be in a crowd at the largest stadium in the world, surrounded by 100,000 screaming people, and you experience it uniquely. No one can get behind your eyeballs and inside your ears and experience it in here at the way you hear. You're red, that you see the color red is your red. Then it can't be mine. You can't see it the way I see it. And this is a very important mental concept to get to avoid being victimized by other people. Because as you'll see in just a moment, there are people out there who would compare you all the time and use this as a way of controlling and manipulating and getting you to be them, to behave in the ways that they want you to behave. When you understand your existential aloneness, when you know that you are unique and special in all the world, then you stop the inclination to compare yourself to other people. You stop constantly telling yourself that you have to be like others. You can't stop constantly striving to accomplish and achieve at the same level that other people have achieved. That you get past this whole need to keep up with the Joneses, because that's a way of putting yourself into a victim trap that it's almost impossible to get out of. You see, even if you're in a race with somebody else, if you're looking over your shoulder to see how you're doing in comparison to how the other person is doing, then what you're really doing at that moment is saying that you are in charge of how I am feeling right now. However you perform in my comparison to you is what makes me happy or not happy. And you've turned the strings over to somebody else. This is a really big area for most people. Most people find themselves unable to isolate themselves from comparing themselves from other people. Children grow up in a world where they hear things about peer pressure all the time, that there's a lot of peer pressure, that everybody has to fit in. And if you don't fit in, then you're an isolate. You're isolated. If you're isolated, then you're a reject. And if you're a reject, then you're an outcast. And it all goes on to all of these horrible labels that we place on people. We have to raise children to understand if there's no peer pressure in the war, then that there are people out there who are saying, do things the way I do them. And then there are individuals who will say, where that got a mind of my own. You want your children to have a mind of their own. You too want to have a mind of your own. You want to think for yourself. You don't want to have somebody telling you constantly that you have to do it because everybody else does it. If you do things the way everybody else does, what have you got to offer? I mean, if you're just like everybody else, you have nothing to offer. You're just one more sheep bleeding away. You don't want to be that way. You want to understand that, yes, there are standards and there are norms within a society, and that we accept those as living standards, but I don't compare myself to other people. I don't have to go out into the world and look at other people to determine how I'm doing in my life. That's got to be an inner thing. That's something that has to come from within. And yet there are people out there, there's many of them who are going to constantly compare you and use all kinds of techniques and strategies to get you to conform by saying, don't you see that other people are doing that? But the first thing you have to do before you can even eliminate other people doing it to you is to get you. Get rid of it yourself. Get rid of this whole notion. The worry thought is nothing more than how you're choosing to use up this present moment by consuming yourself with worry. Guilt is the opposite of that. Guilt is using up the present moment to be concerned about something that you did or didn't do, or should have done or didn't do right, but you're still doing it in the present moment. So worry and guilt in my book, Your Erroneous Zones, I call these the useless emotions. They're just useless because all they do is take you away from the moment and have you fill up the moment with something other than what you want to be doing, which is to be in a fully functioning, loving, present moment experience all the time, just being in the now. And if you want to learn how to do that, go out and watch your animal, because I wrote a book years ago called The Sky's the Limit, and one of the chapters is called First Be a Good Animal. And there's so much that we can learn from the creatures out there, like an otter isn't worried about, whether its mate is going to leave at 2 months from now, or whether it likes somebody else better, or any of those kinds of things. It's just in the moments being an otter. Just be an otter. Just enjoy the moment. And you'll find that all of that other stuff will just pass exactly the way it's supposed to. It's all unfold perfectly. Everything that ever happened to you in your life, and especially in your last marriage, happened to you in the present moment. And everything that's going to happen to you in this relationship is going to happen to you in the present moment. That is, the future and the past are nothing more than illusions. They all occur in the present moment. So your relationship to this marriage is really your relationship to the present moment. So rather than focusing on its ending and some kind of disaster that you just have imagined for yourself, imagine that whatever it is that comes along, you'll be able to handle it. And if there is somebody out there that is more suited to be with your husband, and that's 10 years down the road or what it is, then that's exactly what you'll handle when that were to show up as well. In other words, get the disaster out of it. Get the you. I call this disasterizing. Just getting yourself all worked up. There's an old saying that says, I'm an old man and I've had many troubles, most of which have never happened. And it's like these are all things that we create for ourselves in our mind. Just know that whatever it is that is coming your way in this relationship, know that it is all for your highest good and for your husband's highest good, And who could ask for anything more than that, right? You know what I mean? Think of it instead of what might happen in the future. Ask yourself this question whenever one of those thoughts pops into your head. That is, why am I using up this present moment, which is all I get in life, all I'll ever get? Why would I want to use it being consumed with something that might or might not happen down the road? Why not instead say to myself that we're married, we're happy, we love each other, and I'm going to be in this moment, and I'm going to enjoy. And the more you're able to do that and be there and send that worry thought away, because the worry thought is nothing more than how you're choosing to use up this present moment by consuming yourself with worry. Guilt is the opposite of that. Guilt is using up the present moment to be concerned about something that you did or didn't do or should have done or didn't do right. But you're still doing it in the present moment. So worry and guilt, in my book, Your Erroneous Zones, I call these the useless emotions. They're just useless because all they do is take you away from the moment and have you fill up the moment with something other than what you want to be doing, which is to be in a fully functioning, loving, present moment experience all the time, just being in the now. And if you want to learn how to do that, go out and watch your animal. Because I wrote a book years ago called The Sky's the Limit, and one of the chapters is called First Be a Good Animal. No. And there's so much that we can learn from the creatures out there. Like an otter isn't worried about whether its mate is going to leave at 2 months from now, or whether it likes somebody else better, or any of those kinds of things. It's just in the moments being an otter. Just be an otter. Just enjoy the moment, and you'll find that all of that other stuff will just pass exactly the way it's supposed to. It's all unfold perfectly. Anytime you use up everything, you do it in the present moment. So the question always is, why am I using up my present moment this way? Anything that you're using to think about what happened in the past, if it shouldn't have happened, I wish it wouldn't have, I was wrong, I was bad, I call that guilt. And the reason why guilt is a useless emotion is because it's just an inconsiderate or inconvenient way of using up the present moment. If you use up the present moment to say, okay, I did this and I'm going to learn from it, I'm not going to do it again, that's not guilt. That's just called learning from the past. But if you're obsessed about it and worried about it and feeling sad about it, then you're just practicing one of the most useless things that you can do, which is to feel guilty. Learn from it, but feeling guilty is a waste of the present moment, as is worrying about anything, really. There's a wonderful statement that my teacher in India used to say to me. He said, it makes no sense to worry about the things you have no control over, because if you have no control over them, it makes no sense to worry about them. And then he said, it makes no sense to worry about the things that you do have control over, because if you have control over them, it makes no sense to worry about them. He said, there goes everything that it's possible to worry about. You either have control or you don't. In either case, worry is a waste of your present moments. So in any instant, you just ask yourself, do I have any control over this, yes or no, right? And move on. And that's what the Serenity Prayer is really about. Grant me the wisdom to know the difference between the things I can control and the things I can't control. And for sure, you can't control anything that's already happened. You just can't control it. And then something came over me. I remember what Mark Twain said about forgiveness. He said, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. And something came over me that had never come over me before. I said to my father, I forgive you. I don't know why. I said, from this moment on, for the rest of my life, I will send you love. I will only see you in a loving light. I put the chain up, I drove out, and I went home. I flew back up to New York, took a very brief sabbatical of about 2 weeks, and I went down to a place in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, called the Spindrift Motel. I checked in and I wrote a book called Your Erroneous Zones. Today there are 32 million copies of that book in 48 languages. I wrote it in less than 2 weeks, beginning to end. When I left there, I started running, and I started a running streak shortly after that went for 22 years without missing a day, 8 miles every day. I quit drinking. I entered into a different kind of relationship in my life. The children that I had been wanting began to show up in my life. I changed my diet around. I stopped eating toxic foods and behaving in toxic ways. And everything that I have been able to create and accomplish in my life came about because, in some mysterious way, a business card got put into a car that had never been driven and ended up in my shirt when I was going to the place where I was trying to find my father. I could never begin to explain all of that. It is all so mystically mysterious, but that act literally changed my life and turned my life around.